Story 1. A bed bug infestation. I had one in my first apartment that I got from neighboring units, and it took about a year and moving once to get rid of them completely. To know that the one place in your home where you're supposed to relax and rest is infested, and that you're going to wake up covered in new bites every day, contributed to a significant decline in my mental health. They honestly make you feel like you're going crazy. Story 2. Several years of abuse in the troubled teen industry, getting kidnapped in the middle of the night twice and dragged on a plane to hell, knowing your parents happily funded the whole thing. Story 3. I put this up on another thread last night, but it rings just as true here. I married a small-town country boy, the career military kind, standing at a perfect 6 feet 1 inch, 250 pounds with storm gray eyes. I absolutely handed him the pen I was chewing on in line at the bank when he said, "Ma'am, might I borrow that?" Not even my equal, truthfully the better half. He was my peace, and together we were plenty. It was true love, the kind that transcends time and space. He gave me 2 beautiful girls and then proceeded to be such a good dad, such a girl dad. It healed old, knotted wounds in my chest. We had a charmed life. My best friend in all the best ways. His laugh literally added years to my life. He was everything I wasn't and more than I deserved. I had a lot of trauma before him, and I always felt like he was my reward for making it. He put in 2 decades in uniform, 9 combat tours. We waited for him proudly and loudly. He wasn't home for years if you combine his time, but he was always deeply devoted, and we always flourished. This beautiful man who occupied the space between my heartbeats and breath. He retired last year and started acting off horror film level type off. We thought maybe his adjustment to civilian life was harder for him than anticipated. I'll spare you the excruciating and sad avalanche of crazy things that we endured for over a year. Therapy turned into other doctors and eventually neurologists, and we found out that he had dementia. Took him faster than we could figure it out. He was 41. It's been 5 months. My oldest is 16, and she's worried that I'll grow older in sorrow, hand in hand with my grief because I lost her dad. She expressed in therapy that she knew what real love was from seeing us and was afraid for me having to live without him. She can't imagine it. She watched me send him to war and him return to me enough times. She thought him invincible. I'll tell you what I told her. I had my forever person, my great soul-rendering love, and even though it didn't last, all my wildest dreams came true. I hope it never finds me again. A love that rivals the heavens. So I hope it finds you. I hope destiny weaves a fairy tale around you and that you get a happily ever after. I hope with all the love I once held that yours rattles the stars and lasts forever. That's what I hope for my daughters. What I had. I hope it finds you too if it hasn't. And I hope it stays. For the man whom the sun rose and set in my world. Who said my name like a prayer. You gave me enough to last a lifetime. I miss you. Every second in between this one and the next. Thank you for the award, kind Redditor. I am overwhelmed by the kindness in the comments. Genuine, beautiful, poetic commentary. Thank you. I was asked many times for another piece. I wrote him a lot of love letters over the years because he was often far away from home. For those that asked, here's a piece of one of my favorites. Every breath within the notes of all the love songs ever written is how I get to the place where I try to fill the space between heartbeats. For that is where I find you, in the days before you belonged to me. The saddest days of my life are the long years that stretched between us when I didn't know your name. You need not call me back in time to you. Simply look at me should you wish to see a soul transcended. If you yearn to hear the angels sing. When God Almighty roared life into the universe and set galaxies on axis to rival the heavens, undoubtedly, our stars were born together. It is so easy to love you. I cannot fathom another reason. Surely our romance has echoed through 1,000 lifetimes, and without fail, it will ring through eternity. In this, I will believe for all of my days, and when time stops, I will find you and love you again. It is said that when God calls us at the end, we leave everything behind but our love. My prayers have never changed. I ask for nothing more than to keep yours and take the long way home. Anything less would break my heart. For the man whom the sun rises and sets, for all the magic between us, I'll always be a fool for you. We didn't get to take that long road, and I think I'll be homesick for him all of my life. Thank you for the awards and brilliant, beautiful comments. My heart has been full all day. What a lovely feeling. Story 4. Kidney stones. Anyone who has experienced these knows what I am talking about. If you have not, it feels like razor blades endlessly spinning in your abdomen. I had 4 last year. The pain was so bad that my mind wished for death. Drink water, kids. Story 5. Psychosis. After meditating and educating yourself enough that you are fully aware you are in psychosis and not acting rationally but unable to stop it. Story 6. I have complex post-traumatic stress disorder from being raped as a child, and I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. I feel like a powerless 5-year-old again when someone walks past me in public and I catch a smell of the same washing powder my abuser used. It's been 20 years, and not a day goes by where I don't think about what happened. Trauma is horrible. Story 7. Losing a loved one to terminal cancer. Seeing someone in immense pain as they wither away to a hollow version of their vibrant self will always be seared into my mind. The feeling of being powerless is a constant stress. Story 8. Eating the world's hottest peppers. Short story. I ate 2 ghost peppers several years ago, and to this day, no pain has ever come close to what I felt that day. After eating them, I threw up half an hour later, and 20 minutes after that, I had raging diarrhea. The pain only got worse from there and lasted for about 6 days. I went to bed that night with the worst stomach pain of my life. I thought it would be gone the next morning, but I was wrong, and it only intensified. At this point, it felt like a volcano had exploded in my stomach, and the pain became so unbearable that I was crying my eyes out. I was in so much pain that I honestly thought I had to go to the hospital, but thankfully I didn't. For the next 5 days, it was the worst experience of my life. I would vomit every other hour, all while my stomach felt like it was on fire. By the end of the 6th day, it was starting to subside and was gone by the 7th day. That was the worst pain of my life that I wouldn't even wish on my worst enemy. Be aware of extremely spicy foods, everyone, and learn from my mistake. Story 9. I had and am still recovering from extreme heavy metal and petrochemical poisoning that was nearly fatal. I experienced migraines, headaches, nausea, and dizziness every day. I had no energy and felt stabbing pains in all my organs. I had brain zaps from all the chemicals in my brain and constant shaking because my nervous system had metals. I couldn't listen to music, gained weight, lost a quarter of my hair, and couldn't interact with anyone. I would never wish this kind of torture on anyone. Story 10. Pet loss. I had to say goodbye to my soul dog on April 30th, 2023, and I adopted another baby on April 29th, 2024, just for me to have him for less than a month before I had to say goodbye to him too. I miss both of them so much. I cry thinking about them on a regular basis. Story 11. False allegations. I woke up every day for a year with the worst imaginable dread. I couldn't stand my reality. I would take way more than needed sleeping pills just for an escape. Barely ate and barely took care of myself. The torment of knowing you're innocent but can't prove it is something I wouldn't wish on anyone. Story 12. Going through a really tough breakup where everything felt hopeless and painful. It was a time of deep loneliness and confusion that I wouldn't wish on anyone. Story 13. I had to leave my parents behind very abruptly because of an either them or me situation. I hate it so much that I'm surrounded by people who can turn to their moms and dads, and I can't. Story 14. A herniated disc crushed some nerves in my spine, but the information my brain received was that my whole right leg was being crushed. They put so much morphine in me I had to be on a heart monitor because there was a risk I would simply stop breathing. But still, the pain was so excruciating I just screamed like an insane person almost constantly for 48 hours. I can't describe the pain. After 5 years, I just look back at it in complete disbelief. Story 15. Watching my parents die. We all have to face it, but I still would not wish it on anyone. It is terrible beyond words. I am going to be 60 in 3 weeks, and they died 10 and 11 years ago, and it still hurts. Story 16. I had a massive hemorrhagic stroke at the age of 23. I am 30 now. After going into a coma for 9 days, I had to relearn how to walk, talk, and recover from aphasia and ataxia. I still suffer from various parts of it, but I am glad to be alive. I would not want anyone, even my worst enemy, to have to go through it. Absolutely dreadful. Story 17. My father abandoned my mother, my sister, and me. I had to replace my father as the man of the house at 15. I even thought about dropping out of school to work. My mother never let me and told me to finish school. My sister went to live with my father, also abandoning us and making my mother pay child support for her, even though he didn't need it. That was just one of the things he did to try and spite my mother. Now we are better off. I have a job to help support my mother. We have our own home, a new car. I got her old car, and enjoy going out every once in a while. My mother has always told our friends, who by the way helped us through it all, that I was always her loyal one. I might have gone through a lot and didn't have a traditional last few years of childhood, but I can only thank God and my mom for making me the man I had to be. Story 18. Being diagnosed with terminal cancer robs you of everything. Physically, mentally, your sense of self, your dreams, your future. It's been 2.5 years of constant pain and struggle, and I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. I went from being a healthy 30-year-old with a master's degree, working a job I loved, and married to my soulmate and college sweetheart, to a completely disabled person with a colostomy bag and nephrostomy tubes, with 2-foot-long scars up and down my abdomen from failed surgeries. To be clear, my husband is still here, and I can't describe just how wonderful and supportive he's been. My treatment plan is what's called palliative. They can't cure my cancer, can just treat some symptoms and try to prolong life. I've gone through more than 20 rounds of chemotherapy with no end in sight. I can't stop. It's not shrinking the tumors, but it is keeping them from growing. So that's the best I can hope for. Getting poisoned every 3 weeks, spending all day in bed because of the nausea and joint and bone pain. Losing half my body weight because I can't keep food down. Not recognizing the bald, emaciated skeleton in the mirror. Having to make hard choices with bad outcomes, but still having to go with it because the alternative is worse. And wondering if I should just give it up because I can see the toll it is taking on my husband, who is now my full-time caregiver, and the medical bills keep rolling in. Anyway, cancer sucks. 0 out of 10 would not recommend. Story 19. Grief. I lost my nephew to suicide last year. Grief has changed almost every aspect of my life. I do not see things as bright anymore. I have a new level of irritation, one that I hate. My health took a dive. My weight skyrocketed. My face aged 10 years in one. I know everyone will suffer loss, but I wish we could just be sad instead of having the grief. Story 20. A horse kicked me square in the groin. Both of my testicles ruptured, and I had to have surgery. I immediately vomited and passed out, and when I came to, I vomited and passed out again. Paramedics woke me up and administered morphine, but it still wasn't enough to prevent me from immediately passing out from the pain. It was like my brain would just say no and shut off anytime I get a surge of pain. That much pain I wouldn't wish on anyone. Even the nurses felt bad, and most of them were well aware of how much pain you have to be in to pass out multiple times. I wish that on nobody. Story 21. Losing my dad at 10. That was rough. Seeing my mom break a million times over trying to tell me was torture no person should experience. My mom loved my dad, like really loved him. It broke her. Story 22. Walking in on my then love interest sleeping with my best friend on the eve of my other best friend's wedding, while I was supposed to smile and keep myself together because I was the maid of honor. Yes, she knew I was into him, and yes, he knew I was into him, and yes, he told me he was into me too. So, such is life. Story 23. When I was still in agony from it, what I realized is that I would not wish my dead wisdom tooth on my worst enemy. But now that that's over, I realize that I should. The oafs who harmed my friend deserve worse. Story 24. I had a period when I worked at such an exhausting job that I literally lived on the verge of a nervous breakdown. I was constantly staying late at the office, returning home late, hardly sleeping, and feeling like I had no control over anything in my life anymore. At some point, my body started to give in. I started having health problems, And one day, while standing at a bus stop waiting for a bus, I just burst into tears because I could no longer contain all this stress. I would not wish this state on my worst enemy when you feel completely exhausted and lost, and it seems like there is no way out. Story 25. There is nothing I would not wish on my worst enemy. I do not have a worst enemy unless you count J.K. Rowling, but since she does not know I exist, that is probably pushing it. However, if I did have a worst enemy, I would want access to all the worst things to wish on them and deploy as appropriate. Story 26. My wife took her own life. I came home from work and found her. She was my favorite person I have ever met, and I loved her with every fiber of my being. She was 37. Her 39th birthday would have been this month. Story 27. Shingles was pretty terrible. Painkillers didn't touch it. 800 milligrams ibuprofen, gabapentin, oxycodone. It lasted for nearly 2 weeks. Lost 15 pounds because I couldn't hold down food. It was on my back, and any pressure on the rash was excruciating. I was balled up on my knees moaning for days on end. While I didn't find it funny at the time, my wife thought I suddenly took up religion as she walked in and I was in prayer position speaking in tongues. Multiple trips to urgent care and hospital only to be told there's nothing they can do. Finally went away, but that experience was awful. 0 out of 10 would not recommend.